Okay, let's try this one. Hi-yo, watchin' oh, hey, oh. Hi-yo, watchin' hi-yo, watchin' Hello. Turtle was angry. Well, you'd be angry too. You'd be angry too if there was somebody that had developed a taste for turtle soup and you were a turtle. So Turtle was angry, and he was angry at man. And that's the story I'm going to tell you about today. The turtle that I'm thinking about is this turtle. Let me get you a picture of it so you can see it. This turtle right here. He's called the red-eared turtle, and he's kin. Yeah, see him there? He's called the red-eared turtle, and he's kin to the yellow-bellied sliders that we have so many around here. He's native to the southeastern United States, and you can see what he's got right there, can't you? They call him red-eared, but that's not really his ear. That's more the side of his face, isn't it? That's kind of his cheek. So in a way, he looks kind of like he's got war paint there, doesn't he? So this is really kind of another how come story. How come the red-eared turtle has war paint on his face? We're going to tell that story. But before I tell you about that story, I'd like to tell you about some of the turtles we have out here at Arrowhead. We've got lots of turtles out at Arrowhead. I'm standing in our outdoor enclosure for our gopher tortoises. Our gopher tortoises are the most unusual turtle that we have here at Arrowhead. They're a threatened species because they're losing their habitat. They like to live in the pine barrens, the sandy pine barrens, South Georgia and North Florida. That's where they like to live, where they can build big, long burrows in the sand. Sometimes those burrows go back, as far back as the length of a school bus. And inside those burrows, they can live nice and warm, the temperature nice and cool in the hot summers and nice and warm in the cold weather. And what a nice place they've made for themselves. Now they plan those burrows only for themselves, but it turns out that lots and lots of other animals like to live in those burrows. So the gopher tortoise burrows make a wonderful place for other animals to live. So there are many, many, many animals that live inside the burrows. Would you like to see a gopher tortoise? I hear Elsa climbing around over here, so let's go get Elsa. Hello, Elsa. Tortoises and turtles are wonderful critters. They have very long lifespans, for example. Tortoises can live for a long, long time. This tortoise is probably about as old as I am, and I'm 73 years old. That's quite a big and an old tortoise, and we take care of Elsa here at Arrowhead to help protect this species. She's not the only one we have. We have 5 gopher tortoises here. The other 3 are still in the center up here, but I brought 2 out for you to see. Elsa, who probably is about my age, maybe a little younger, maybe a little older. Let's see. Let me bring her close so you can see her face. There you go. Say hello to the kids at home, Elsa. Some of you will remember her. Look at those front great paws, wonderfully adapted for digging because she's a burrower. So she sticks her nose in that hole that she makes in the ground and she digs and digs and digs with those front feet. Her back feet look a little bit like an elephant's feet, kind of stubby and good, tough, pushing feet. So she digs out with those front feet and the dirt will just fly out of the burrow behind her. And she can burrow deep into that soft, sandy soil that's in the area where she likes to live. Her habitat, again, are those pine barrens down in South Georgia and North Florida. Oh, well, let's look at Snailtail over here. This is another of our gopher tortoises, and this one is much younger This one, well, maybe a teenager, you suppose. Probably a teenager, a much younger one, but still look at him. He has the big shell. What a wonderful adaptation that is. That shell really helps protect him from his predators, doesn't it? And you can see that it's all one piece. The top, the carapace, and the bottom, the plastron, are connected by solid bone at the side. And the bone, of course, is covered with the scales. It's a reptile, so it has the dry, scaly skin of a reptile. And there's his face. Snailtail, say hi. This is Snailtail, the gopher tortoise. And again, look at those wonderfully adapted front legs for digging and back legs to prop himself against as he digs. Yes, wonderfully adapted. Now, some kids are familiar that some animals, some of the turtles, can pull their legs and their heads completely inside their shells and close up. He's not one of those. He can pull in a good bit, and that is wonderful protection from him. If you were a fox or another animal that wanted to eat this fella, you'd break your teeth if you tried to eat that shell, wouldn't you? So that's pretty doggone good protection for him. Well, let's see what else we got. Now, this is an example of a turtle shell that is like, well, I guess most turtles have shells like this. As I mentioned on the other one, he has a solid one-piece shell. The carapace and the plastron are connected at the sides. This is a shell for a turtle that died a long time ago, and we saved its shell so that we could show it to you. This is his shell. And this is probably from a yellow-bellied slider, which is a cousin to the red-eared turtle that I showed you the picture of a while ago. And that's what most turtle shells look like. But I want to show you one that has very special adaptations. Hang on. This is an old shell from a box turtle. And it doesn't come in one piece. Instead, that shell comes in 3 pieces. Can you see our 3 pieces here? Comes in 3 pieces. The carapace, or top, and then the plastron, or bottom, is in 2 pieces, connected in the middle by cartilage and sinew and tendons and so forth, so that it can act like a hinge and open and close on the bottom of the animal's body. The top domed shell is also connected to these at the edges by cartilage, so that the back part of the bottom part of the shell is hinged right there when it's alive and can open and close like that. Let's see if I can hold this together. And the front part is hinged right there, so that he can very carefully, there, if I hold it very carefully, I can show you, he can close up completely like a box. He can pull his head completely into the shell, pull his legs, front legs in, his back legs in, his tail in, his head in, and completely close up. Now that would be pretty daunting for a fox to try to eat him, wouldn't it? He would definitely break his teeth. Now this is an old shell, and some of the scutes or shell scales have come off, and you can see the bone underneath and the bone underneath here. You can see that the turtle shell is a part of its skeleton. He can't leave his shell, can he? It's part of him. And as a matter of fact, if you look, you'll see that looking inside of the top shell, the carapace, you can see where the vertebrae are. You can see where the spine was for this animal. So the upper shell is really kind of a combination of backbone and ribs that are all fused together to make this wonderful adaptation, this wonderful protection. All right, well, that's the box turtle. Well, today's story, I reminded you, is about which turtle? The red-eared turtle. So let's get back to our story. Several years ago, my wife and I were at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee. We go every year. We have the best time up there listening to storytellers from all over the country. Lots of different kinds of storytellers. One day, we ventured to the top of the hill, to what we call the tent on the hill at that festival, to hear Joe Bruchac. Oh, what a wonderful storyteller he is. He tells stories from his group, the people he comes from. He is an Abanaki. The Abanaki are a people who in old days lived in the northeastern part of what is now the United States. But of course, they were there long before there was anything called the United States or even anything called America. So the Abanaki lived there. And those are the people that are Joe Bruchac's family is from. And he tells stories from that and other groups of Native Americans. And I love to hear stories. So we climbed that hill that day and we heard him tell some stories. And one of the stories that he told was called Turtle on the Warpath. And as soon as that story was over, I told my wife, oh, wow, I want to have that story to tell the boys and girls when I'm at Arrowhead, because I didn't have a real good turtle story at that time. And we have lots of turtles here. So afterwards, while other folks were getting this autographed and so forth, I got in line too. And when it was my turn to talk to Mr. Joe, I said, Mr. Joe, I sure would like to tell that turtle story to my children at Arrowhead Environmental Education Center in Rome, Georgia. Could I have your permission to tell your story? And he said, well, of course you can, Terrell. He said, it's not really my story. He said, I learned that story from my mom and dad, and they learned it from their moms and dads, and they learned it from their moms and dads, and they learned it from their moms and dads, and they learned it from their moms and dads. This is an old, old story that goes way back in the traditions of the Abanaki people, and you're welcome to tell this story. Well, I was so glad to hear that, and I bought his books, and I bought his CDs, and I enjoyed listening to his stories on the way home and later, and I learned to tell the story called Turtle on the Warpath. That's the story I wanted to tell you today. Like I told you a while ago, Turtle woke up. He was already angry that morning. He had been dreaming about man. Oh, man. Man had developed a taste for what? Turtle soup. That made Turtle so angry. He crawled out of his sleeping furs that morning and he said, today is the day that I go on the warpath against man. And he went down to the river right there next to his cabin. And he crawled into the river and he swam around taking his morning bath. And after he'd swum around for a while, he swam over to the edge of the river. And there was a big streak of red clay in the bank. He reached up into that red clay and got a big clump. And he smeared it on his right cheek. And then he reached up with his left paw and got another clump of that red clay and smeared it on his left cheek. He had on his war paint. Oh boy. He went back to his cabin and he dressed in his war clothes. And then he went down to the river again and climbed into his canoe. Now, how big do you think Turtle's canoe might have been? You saw that red-eared turtle shell that I showed you. Actually, it was a yellow-bellied slider shell. It was about that big. How big do you think his canoe should be? Maybe that big? Maybe even a little bigger. But would it be as big as a people canoe? I don't think so, do you? No way. He climbed into his canoe and he started paddling down the river, singing his river war song. It goes like this. I hope you'll sing it with me. Kaiowachane-o, oh-ho-eh-o. Kaiowachane-o, Kayowatchaneo. And as he went around a curve in the river, he looked up on the bank, and there he saw, way up in the crotch of a big old possum oak tree, a great, big, black animal. He had kind of a stubby nose and roundish ears, and he had a little bit of brown around, and he was reaching into the bowl, that's another word for the trunk, into the bowl of the tree where there was a hole, and pulled out gobs of honey. Eating that honey. It was delicious. And as he ate that honey, he looked down and saw Turtle in the canoe. He said, "Oh, Turtle, you're on the warpath." How did he know that Turtle was on the warpath? The war paint. He saw the war paint, didn't he? "You're on the warpath." "Yes, I'm on the warpath against man. Man has been cruel to my brothers." Bear said, "Oh, man has been cruel to my brothers too. I will come on the warpath with you." And Turtle looked at that bear. He looked at his canoe, and he thought, if that bear gets in this canoe, we'll go straight to the bottom of the river. And he said, "Oh, Bear, of course you may go on the warpath with me if you're a mighty warrior. But a mighty warrior must be able to run very fast. Can you run fast?" Do you think Bear can run fast? Bear climbed out of that tree, said, "Watch me run." He turned away from the river, and that bear started running. He ran and 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 he ran. He ran really fast away from the river. Now, boys and girls, don't ever get into a race with a bear. They may look big and clumsy, but they can run very fast. But you know what Turtle said? He said, "I'm sorry, Bear. You're too slow to go on the warpath with me." And Turtle climbed back into his canoe and started paddling away downstream, singing his river war song, "Kayowatchaneo, oh, hey, oh, Kayowatchaneo, Kayowatchaneo." Around the next curve, there was another animal up on the side of the bank. Now this animal, see if you can figure him out. He looked a lot like a dog, but he was bigger than a dog. He had a sharp snoot and sharp ears, and the moon was still in the sky that morning. And that animal was opening his mouth, pointing it up toward the moon, and he was going, "Ow! Ow!" Do you know what he is? It was Wolf. And Wolf looked down and saw Turtle, said, "Oh, Turtle, you're on the warpath." "Yes, I'm on the warpath against man. Man has been cruel to my brothers." Wolf said, "Yes, man's been cruel to my brothers too. I will come on the warpath with you." And Turtle looked at that wolf. He saw those big teeth. He thought, "My shell is strong, but if that wolf were to bite my shell, he could crush it with teeth like that." But he looked at the wolf and he said, "Of course, Wolf, you may come on the warpath with me if you're a mighty warrior, but a mighty warrior must be able to run really fast. Can you run fast?" Do you think a wolf can run fast? You better believe it. Wolf said, "Watch me." He turned away from the river and he started running. He ran even faster than Bear. Away he went. And when he was far enough away, do you know what that turtle shouted? You're not going to believe it. It is the worst excuse I have ever heard. He said, "I'm sorry, Wolf. You run too fast. You might run away in battle." Do you believe that? I think that's the worst excuse I've ever heard. Turtle climbed back into his boat, and down the river he went. "Kayowatchaneo, ho-eh-oh, Kayowatchaneo, Kayowatchaneo." Around the next bend, there was another animal by the bank. This animal was much smaller. This animal might fit in that canoe. But he had never seen that animal before. The animal saw him and said, "Oh, Turtle, you're on the warpath." "Yes, I'm on the warpath against man." And that animal said, "I will go on the warpath with you." Turtle looked at that animal. He was about the size of a big cat, but he didn't look like a cat. He had a big question mark tail, and he was black with white stripes that went from his nose right across his head, up his back, and up his tail. Do you know what he was? You might have smelled him. It was Skunk. But Turtle had never met Skunk. He didn't know about Skunk. He said, "I'm Turtle. Who are you?" "I'm Skunk." "Skunk, you may come on the warpath with me if you have a mighty weapon. Do you have a mighty weapon?" Skunk smiled. "Yes," he said, "I have a mighty weapon." Turtle said, "Good, good, good. Show me your weapon." Skunk said, "What?" Turtle said, "Show me your weapon." Skunk said, "Oh, you don't want me to show you my weapon." Turtle said, "If you're going on the warpath with me, you must show me your weapon." Skunk said, "Okay." And Skunk turned his back to Turtle, lifted his tail, and went, psst. Turtle grabbed his nose. Pew! He jumped in the water to try to wash that smell off of him. And finally, sputtering, he came out of the water, climbed back into the canoe, and said, "Yes, yes, Skunk, you have a mighty weapon. But don't show me your weapon again. Just climb in the canoe with me and let's go to battle." And down the river, the two friends went paddling, singing together their River War song, "Help Me Out." Kaiowachane-o, ho-eh-ho, Kaiowachane-o, Kaiowachane. Around the next bend, there was the strangest animal of all. It just looked like a stick lying on the side of the river. But then something tickled that stick, and he curled into an S shape. And when he did, his tail went ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch, ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. Do you know which animal that is? That's right, it was Rattlesnake. Rattlesnake said, "Oh, Turtle, you're on the warpath." "Yes, I'm on the warpath against man. He's been cruel to my brothers." "Man has been cruel to my brothers too," said Rattlesnake. "I will go on the warpath with you." Turtle looked at him. "Well, you may go on the warpath with me if you have a mighty weapon. Do you have a mighty weapon, Rattlesnake?" Rattlesnake said, "Yes, I have a mighty weapon." Turtle looked at him. "All right, you don't have to show it to me. Just come on and go with us." And so Snake crawled into the canoe with him, and the three friends paddled. I don't know how in the world Rattlesnake paddled, but the three friends paddled down the river singing together, "Kaiowachane-o, ho-eh-ho, Kaiowachane-o, Kaiowachane," around the next bend, and there, where the two big rivers came together, was a village, the Man Village. Oh, you should have seen all the cabins. There were men and women and children coming in and out. There were lots of them. Turtle said, "They are many, and we are few. We must wait till nightfall. Perhaps we can find a way to surprise them." So very carefully and silently, the three friends paddled up a tiny creek next to the village and pulled their canoe into a stand of river cane and waited for nightfall. Why, finally, when it got dark, they listened, and it wasn't long before they heard it. You hear it at your house sometimes, I'll bet. They heard sounds like this. It was the men snoring. Women don't snore. The men were snoring, and they knew they could come out then. So they snuck out of the river cane and went looking for a place to hide till the morning so that they could surprise the village first thing in the morning. The skunk was the first one to find a place to hide because right there next to the river cane was the spring. That's where the folks would come down the next morning to get water to fix their breakfast with. So he hid there right next to the spring. Then the the rattlesnake, he crawled around this cabin and that cabin till he found the flint knapper's cabin. Now the flint knapper, he was the one in the village who was in charge of making all of the arrows and spears. So he had flint stones around his cabin that he could chip off to make arrowheads and spear points. And he had sticks, some small sticks that were just right for making arrows, and some longer sticks that were just right for making spears. And he had feathers for fletching those arrows with. And he spent every day working on arrows and spears. And he had lined up there some sticks that he was going to work on some spears with the next day, and they happened to be just about the same length as Rattlesnake. So Rattlesnake, he just slithered up next to those sticks, made himself as still as he could, as straight as he could, and he just looked, especially with the mud of the river on him, he just looked like another stick. And that left Turtle. Turtle wandered around the village and wandered around the village till he found the potter's cabin. The potter was in charge of making all the pots that they used. Sometimes he made very shallow pots that were used almost like plates. Sometimes he made small bowls that were used to serve food in or to cook food in. Sometimes he made great jars and pots that were used for carrying water and for cooking. Oh, he had lots of pots of all different sizes. All Turtle had to do was to wander around until he found a group of pots that were about the same size as his shell. And again, he already had a muddy shell, and when he pulled up beside some of those overturned pots, he just looked like another pot. That was good camouflage, wasn't it? Ha ha! And the three friends waited for the sun to rise in the morning. And when the sun came up over the gum trees, and the men and women and children began to wake and come out of their cabins, some of the women gathered and began to come down to the spring to gather the water for breakfast. And as one of the ladies stepped into the spring and dipped her big water jar into the spring to collect water, out jumped Skunk. He lifted his tail and psst! Those ladies hollered, "Ah! Pee-you!" But they were tough ladies, and one of the ladies grabbed her nose with one hand, and she grabbed that skunk with the other hand, and she started beating that skunk against the ground, beating that skunk against the ground, beating that skunk against the ground. That skunk said, "Ooh-choo, chow-chow, choo-choo, chow-chow." As soon as she let go of that skunk, he went running off into the woods and was out of the story. Bye-bye, Skunk. Well, meanwhile, the flint knapper came out of his cabin, and he looked around for what he was going to work on. And he saw those sticks that were for spears and said, "That's what I'll work on today." He reached down to pick up one, but just as he reached for one, a little ant tickled that rattlesnake, and the end of his tail went ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. That man backed up. He said, "That's not a stick. That's a rattlesnake." And he reached down and picked up a great big flint stone. And he went kabonk, and kabonk that poor rattlesnake right on the noggin. That rattlesnake, ooh-choo-chow-chow, choo-choo-chow-chow, and he went slithering out across into the woods and was out of the story. Meanwhile, out of the potter's cabin came the old potter. He was an old potter, and he had his cane. He had his walking stick that he used, and he thought, "What shall I work on? Oh, I'll work on that one." And he reached down to pick up the pot that was really the turtle. And as he reached toward that turtle's head came out of its shell, and that turtle grabbed on to the calf of that man. And that man said, "Ooh-choo-chow-chow, choo-choo-chow-chow, you're a turtle, you're not a pot." And he started beating that poor turtle with his stick. He beat it and beat it and beat it and cracked its shell. But that turtle wouldn't let go. That man said, "Let go of me, turtle, let go of me, turtle." Turtle said, "I won't let go, won't let go, won't let go, won't let go." That man said, "If you don't let go, turtle, I'm going to take you to the fire and burn you." And Turtle said, "Oh, please, Mr. Man." He was a smart turtle. He said, "Oh, please, Mr. Man, burn me. That would warm me up. Put me in the fire. I'm kind of cold, but please, please, please don't put me in the river. I'm afraid of the water." Do you think turtle's afraid of the water? That man said, "Oh, you want to go in the fire? I'll take you to the river instead." He went walking down to that river. Ooh, choo, chow, chow, choo, choo, chow, chow. He waded into the water, and as soon as that turtle's head was underwater, he let go of that man's leg. He swam all the way across that river, climbed up onto a log on the other side. He stood up on that log, put his fingers in his ears, and said, "Nanny, nanny, boo, boo. I was born and raised in the river, Mr. Man. I was born and raised in the river." And that's my version of Joe Bruchac's version of an old Abanaki story, Turtle on the Warpath. You know, the Indian storytellers would tell the boys and girls, now, if you see a black animal with a white stripe, and if his head looks a little bit flat, that's the skunk. You can remember that because remember that lady hit him against the ground and kind of flattened the top of his head. And if you see a snake that when it shakes its tail makes a rattling sound, and if you see that it has kind of a flat head, that's where that flint knapper bumped him on the head with that rock. And if you see a turtle whose shell looks like it's been broken, as they all do, don't they? Then you'll remember that potter hit him with a stick and broke his shell. But if you get too close to him when he's sunning himself on a log in the river, he'll splash off and swim away because he learned his lesson. He's never gone on the warpath against man again.